This weekend, the Mariners made a trade that was unexpected. It wasn't completely unexpected that they would trade Harry Ford in the offseason, but to trade him for a high leverage reliever and have that be the star of the package that they got back, a package of one player, by the way, was a little bit surprising. I've been watching all weekend as people have analyzed this, and I think fans maybe are overreacting a little bit. But I've also seen a lot of people really carrying water for the Mariners on this, and it's been a little bit upsetting. And by the way, I'm not talking about anyone in particular, especially not if you're my friend that may listen to this podcast. It has nothing to do with any. I've really tried to avoid other people's content on this outside of social media and outside of thumbnails from other people's YouTube channels that make it pretty obvious what their stance on this trade was. And this feels like a trade to me that many people, I'm gonna just say this. It's not profitable. It's very profitable to be a cheerleader for the local fan or the local team. If you're gonna make YouTube content or whatever, it's very profitable to be a cheerleader. I have a problem. I'm not able to do that. I'm not able to be anything but the skeptical dickhead that I always am. And it's not good for me. It's not good for traffic or whatever. It's not good for any of that stuff. I don't like the trade. And if you don't like the trade, you're not wrong. Don't let anyone tell you you're wrong. It's not what I would have expected to get from Harry Ford. And frankly, I understand the limitations of Harry Ford. But whatever his limitations are, I would have rather seen him develop in Seattle under whatever update to his development it requires to get him in the lineup than to trade him for a guy that I think is going to have a limited value. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. First, I want to talk. The Mariners traded for Jose Ferrer, a left-handed reliever from the Washington Nationals who throws incredibly hard. Let's talk about who Jose Ferrer is real quick. Jose Ferrer is a player with the last year had a 3.09 expected FIP or xFIP, a 1.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement. That's a good reliever. That's a guy who by the underlying numbers, by the peripherals, that's the word I was looking for. By the peripherals was a very good reliever already. His run prevention hasn't been great. Some of that seems like it's bad luck, but he's been a good reliever by the peripherals already. He throws super hard. He relies heavily on a very good sinker. 70% of his pitches are this high 90s sinker that generates a ton of ground balls. Let's take a look at his StatCast stuff real quick. Jose Ferrer is, you see a lot of red and you're happy about the red, right? He's 94th percentile in fastball velocity, 69th percentile, by the way, in expected ERA, 95th percentile in walk percentage, 93rd percentile in barrel percentage, and 99th percentile in ground ball percentage. That all seems great. A lot of the stuff, if you look at a StatCast, it's more middle of the road. He's, 40 in the 40th percentile, 48th percentile, whiff percentage, 45th percentile, and strikeout percentage. He's not getting a lot of guys to chase out of the strike zone. There are things that are weak about Jose Ferrer's game. Now, do I think that the Mariners have a very good chance of taking Jose Ferrer and finding the things that he does great and accentuating those and also developing some processes or mechanics that get rid of some of the stuff that he does poorly? I think they have a very strong track record of that. They've done it with Gabe Spire. They've done it with a lot of relievers. So if the question is, do I think that Jose Ferrer, do I think he's going to be bad? Absolutely not. I think he's going to be good. I think he's already good, and I think he's going to be good in Seattle. I think that Jose Ferrer makes the 2026 team better. I say that after I've already told you. I played my hand already. I don't like this trade. The reason I don't like this trade is because I think this is too much to give up for a player with this profile. And of course, it doesn't necessarily mean we don't know what about Harry Ford. I don't think that the Mariners were turning down trades for like dominant starters or for dominant position players for Harry Ford. So when I say that I think that they didn't get enough value for Harry Ford, it's not because I think that they were turning down. I'm not pompous enough to believe that the Mariners front office is turning down offers for guys who I think were better. I think the Mariners are pretty decent at evaluating talent at this point, and I think they weren't getting they weren't getting better offers. I do believe this is probably the best offer they received. The Mariners gave up Harry Ford and Isaac Lyon for a reliever who's got some warts. Not literally, by the way. One interesting thing about this trade, by the way, this is an aside, and it's probably going to be, no one's going to care but me. Harry Ford and Jose Ferrer are both the names of prominent actors. So when you search for these guys, we need these guys to have better careers so that they're number one in the search results. Come on, fellas. Yeah, Ferrer's got some issues. He doesn't miss a lot of bats. I want to make a comparison between Jose Ferrer and I made, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm sorry, this is a repeat, but Ferrer profiles very similar to a guy who pitched for the Mariners last year. So I'll reveal his name in a moment. Ferrer, again, 94th percentile in fastball velocity, 93rd in barrel percentage, 99th in ground ball percentage, 95th in walk percentage, which I'm putting last for a reason. There was a Mariners reliever who was 93rd, 0.1 miles an hour on average, lower fastball velocity than Ferrer, 69th in batting in walk percentage, 92nd in barrel percentage, 95th in ground ball percentage. And it was even better, by the way, in certain statistics like average exit velocity, like hard hit percentage. And that guy struggled. And it was a guy that was very frustrating in the postseason, by the way. And I'll tell you, I wanted the Mariners to trade for a high leverage left-handed arm last year at the deadline. And that'll be important in a little bit. The guy that I'm talking about, the guy who has very similar StatCast numbers to Jose Ferrer, is Carlos Vargas, a guy who was tremendously frustrating in the postseason, a guy who, I don't understand it, by the way. I don't understand how you can throw almost 100 miles an hour, touch 100 regularly, and not miss bats. I don't understand how a 100-mile-an-hour fastball can be easy to make contact with. I understand there's extension and there's movement and all this stuff, and that's perfectly valid. Even Carlos Vargas is 73rd percentile in extension. Why is it so easy to hit? I don't know. But the Mariners haven't been able to crack that nut. Vargas came over as one of the players that went to Arizona in the original Gino Suarez trade when the Mariners traded him. Well, I guess it's not the original because he also came over in a trade. but Vargas came over in that trade. So they've had him for a couple years and have not been able to crack the nut. They haven't been able to turn this guy with a world-class arm into a very productive, from a sustainable perspective, pitcher. So, again, it's not a guarantee that Jose Ferrer is going to be a dominant reliever. And even if he becomes a dominant reliever, the fact that there isn't a guarantee, the fact that the probability, by the way, isn't particularly high. I'd say he's good right now. There's a chance that this is as good as he'll ever be. Pretty high chance. I think that still makes the 2026 Mariners better. But if he goes out and becomes Aroldis Chapman, that doesn't change what the trade is right now from a process perspective. And to me, from a process perspective, this seems like an overpay for this guy. So what is Harry Ford? How do we get to this point where a guy who has been a consensus top 100 prospect is suddenly only worth a lefty reliever? How do we get to this point? Well, I think one of the things is the reality about the prospect industry, and I've in the past written for I didn't write about prospects explicitly, but I have written for and have some knowledge of one of the more prominent prospect blogs in Seattle. I don't have a super high opinion of the prospect industry. In general, I think that there's a lot of dishonesty, and I think there's a lot of there's not a lot of examining of the logic. If Harry Ford has probably not been a top 100 prospect for a while, in reality. These lists that he was on, for whatever reason, it was, I don't know why he stayed, but there's been a lot of people who don't think he could stick a catcher for a while. And the bat he's never really flashed a full season of power. And if he doesn't play catcher without the power, and with presumably bad defense at a new position or a DH, the bat just doesn't play. Harry Ford has flaws. This is the reason why everyone's kind of been okay with the Mariners trading Harry Ford, or many people have. Many people who didn't want the Mariners to trade Harry Ford suddenly are thrilled they traded Harry Ford, because what's very profitable is to start at the point that the Mariners are right and what they did was good, because that's the popular opinion right now. By the way, many of these same people were begging for Jerry DiPoto and Justin Hollander to be fired a couple years ago because everything they did was obviously wrong. And I'll tell you, a couple years ago, before the present class of prospects made it, and the Mariners really, I think, kind of went all in on being a draft and develop team, which I hope they're not diverging from right now. And I don't think Harry Ford is necessarily evidence of that, because he's just so blocked with the Mariners. He's so blocked by Cal Raleigh. He's not incredibly valuable on the roster because he doesn't play other positions. And I swear that I've read this somewhere, but I can't find it. I wanted to quote it on here. Maybe I just heard it on an interview. I've heard that he's resistant to position changes and wasn't particularly good in the time that he spent in left field in the minors. So, despite being a catcher, has the athletic profile that many people believe he could switch positions, but has not been, my understanding is, has not been receptive to the idea of switching positions. So all that's to say, the Mariners probably got the best they could for Harry Ford. To me, I'd rather seen them kind of ride it out, wait till he stops being so stubborn as he sits in the organization behind Cal Raleigh and finds a place that's probably better for his prospect status, for his long-term ability, if he's not going to be a catcher. If you're going to trade him for a high-leverage reliever, if you're willing to move him for a high-leverage reliever, what I don't understand is, why now and not last July? There's nothing about Harry Ford's market that should have changed a ton between July and December. There's nothing about Jose Ferrer's market that should have changed a ton between July and December. If you're going to make this trade, why not do it when that guy can be a stalwart in your bullpen in a postseason run? Do the Mariners make the World Series if Jose Ferrer is in their bullpen last year? I don't know. But he certainly doesn't hurt him. I identified that at the deadline, that I thought they needed another left-handed arm. A leverage left-handed arm. A leverage arm, period, but another leverage left-handed arm. Especially, by the way, and I harp on this too much, I will acknowledge that, but especially because the rotation came down to earth, but it wasn't like a down year. I think it was a regression to mean. I think that's what the rotation is. I think the Mariners have not 5 aces. They have 5 number 2 and 3 starters. That's very good. You can obviously make a good, deep postseason run with that configuration. A good way to augment that is to have a lights out bullpen. And Ferrer would have been a welcome addition. Isaac Lyon, by the way, I didn't pull up a scouting report. He's not highly regarded. He is, I will say, putting up interestingly high strikeout numbers at A-ball last year, and I believe his first season of pro ball. But, I mean, not 21-year-old with not a big prospect pedigree. Is he a throw-in? Is he a guy that maybe the Nationals had a higher, had a decent scouting report on? Maybe. Had a higher one than the rest of the league? Maybe. Not. I don't view that as like a massive addition to the trade. So, for this reason, I think the Mariners, the way they managed Harry Ford's time in Seattle, at the very worst, they traded him too late. Sorry. At the very best, they traded him too late. I think his value was probably higher earlier. We don't know that. That's important to acknowledge, I think. We don't know what the Mariners have turned down for Harry Ford. We don't know how much interest there was in Harry Ford. And by the way, if you look for teams that need a suspect defense, no power catcher, not a lot of options out there. There's not a lot of teams that are begging for that kind of catcher. From my perspective anyway. So, because of that, because I think that they mismanaged Harry Ford's prospect career in Seattle, and because I just think they made this trade at the wrong time, at least one half season late. If you were willing to trade Harry Ford for a high leverage reliever, and that was the primary thing coming back to you, you should have done it in July. You should have done it when it really could have made a difference in your immediate ability to win a championship. And because of that, if I'm grading this trade, no one cares about my grade. My grade for this trade is a D+. From the Mariners' perspective. I don't know that it's I'm not saying it's an A from the Nationals' perspective, by the way. I have real questions about Harry Ford as a prospect. And I don't know that he's like an obvious, I don't think he's stepping in day one as a starter in Washington either. But it's a D+ to me because it happens too late in both regards. Too late in Harry Potter. I almost said Harry Potter. Harry Ford's prospect. The P got to me. It happens too late in Harry Ford's status as a prospect. It happens too late to me for the Mariners to maximize their championship probability. So, because of that, and I'll say this, D+ to me doesn't mean fail. I'm grading this on the actual like school grading system. I don't think this was a better than average trade for the Mariners. I don't think this was a C. I think this is a D+. I think it's a worse than average trade. Jerry DiPoto's made significantly better trades than this, and this is not one of his better trades. I hope that Jose Ferrer becomes the reliever that everyone on Twitter has decided he might become in the last 48 to 72 hours. But I also know that the probability of a guy becoming a dominant reliever, pretty low.